So you read a lot. Do you read the books or do you listen to audiobooks?
I read the books. I'm a huge fan of reading. I feel that you are able to be more creative and your brain is able to create the visualization of the things you read. Where it was when I listen, I don't get that visual in my brain. I don't have as much of a picture as
Mm-hmm.
when my brain has freedom to create everything, what the characters sound like, what the scenery looks like, and it's a lot faster. What is it, like 3 times faster to read a book than it is to listen to one?
Maybe for you, I don't know. For me, it's maybe it's slower, but I
Hmm.
just think that I got slower and impatient over the years. Maybe it's moving from left to right to left. I read in both directions, um, and just audiobooks became such. You know, I run. I assume that you are very active as well, and I don't know, gym or whatever. What's your poison? What's your sport poison?
Sport? I mean, I grew up playing ice hockey. It's a hard sport to play in New York City, so I don't do that much. I'm going skiing soon. Used to do that when I lived on the West Coast a lot more. Also a hard sport to do in New York. New York's tough. I mostly, work out at this point. I do Pilates. That's, unfortunately as much as, New York and time will allow for.
Pilates. Okay, we'll get back to that because that's tough. That's super hard. But audiobooks, yeah, I just go on a run or whatever that may be, or here in LA, we drive a lot, put on a podcast or an audiobook. The challenge, yes, while you're driving, you really want to make sure that your eyes is on the road and don't go to some sort of imaginary place. But yeah, it's and when you read, is that paper or you're also Kindle person, stuff like that?
I'm a Kindle on iPad person. I just love the idea that I can take it anywhere. I can open it up on a computer. Everything is saved in the cloud. Any notes I take in the book are available at a moment's notice. If someone asks me about something and I want to pull a quote that I remember reading in a book, I love that.
Yeah, hmm, and we'll get most likely later about searching for highlights and notes of books and how you get those referrals back and find them. But yeah, Pilates is hard. I know we usually people expect that we'll move, but man, I tried Pilates. No, it's you see all these young girls just like staying in that static pose and breathing, reverse breathing to what you'll expect in yoga. And I was just sweating all over the place, shaking. My
Yeah,
muscles were like, I consider myself being strong, but no. That's no.
yeah, it's a completely different set of muscles and a very important set of muscles.
Well, I think that that's way too much about too much information about myself, and thank you very much for sharing what you're doing. Brad, how about you'll tell the audience about what you're doing? How did you get to insurance? But before we get to insurance, tell us about Nomad Data.
Sure. So we are a software company. We're roughly 5 years old, based in New York City. Originally started under the premise of helping companies buy data from other companies. Data today drives business decision making. It drives an understanding of risk. It drives product features, and increasingly, it's driving model training, AI model training. And so the need for data in the world right now is insatiable, and the types of data people are looking for are extremely different. And before we started the company, we saw the problem that most solutions to this problem of where do I find the right data were to present the client with some sort of a list of hundreds or thousands of things and say, here's a list, go look for it and find it. But, it wasn't really categorized in ways people understood. Data doesn't neatly fit in one category. It's nearly impossible to shrink a terabyte data set to a one paragraph description and expect anyone to know, is this going to help? Is this not going to help? And so we started with reinventing the data search model, where we said, forget about what's out there, forget about lists and categories. You come into our platform and you just describe in plain English I need data on this. And, we just had the fires in LA. That was a search we got many, many
Yeah.
times before the fires. We want historic fire risk for the Los Angeles area. These were insurance companies that wanted to be able to price their risk models and wanted to understand what happened when, volume of damage, quantity, cost, etc., which is a very important input to their models. And so we built the system in a way that it learned. And that's really important because even a company selling data doesn't know all the things it's useful for. And so our platform basically is a question engine where customers come in and say, who has data on California forest fires going back 10 to 15 years? Our engine uses AI, looks across what is today 4,000 companies selling data.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it's really guessing. These three companies look like they would have it. And then it actually goes out and asks them. It says, hey, do you have historic forest fire data in Canada and Florida and California? And they respond and say, okay, we have it in these 5 geographies going back this far. These are the 10 metrics we have. And by doing that, they're training us. We now know more about that data than we did yesterday. And by companies all over the globe asking these questions and these companies giving answers, it's a living, breathing index of what the world's data can do. And that's really, really important. And that's really our core asset. But the product is simple. I need data. Here's what I need. Vendors respond to me. I get it. We then built a whole procurement platform around that because folks that buy data, there's a lot of processes. You have InfoSec, you have compliance, you have legal, you have all sorts of testing and complex renewals and product learnings. And we needed a system to help them track all that. And as part of that system, we built an AI document engine because people would end up with thousands and thousands of pages of contracts. They would have questions, they would need clauses extracted. And so we built a feature called Document Chat, which today can read about 250,000 pages a minute of one document or thousands of documents and either answer questions or actually extract data. It can extract a full table from a PDF. It can read 20,000 files and produce a CSV based on, let's say procurement contracts. And so so we had some insurance clients for the data products initially. And when we showed them that feature, that was somewhat of a game changer for us in insurance because many of them said, you know what, we actually have enormous repositories of documents and we need to do these manual complex things. Is there any way this engine can be used to help automate that process? And so, that started about a year ago and took us in a very different direction where now that engine is essentially a generalized document workflow engine. So we have insurers that use that for claim letter processing. So they have a litigation, they get a 10,000 page document, and a human would have to go through page by page, or they would have to hire lawyers at the cost of $1,000 an hour to go through these enormous documents. Today, our engine can read a 10,000 page PDF in about 60 seconds and produce anything they want, a specific summary, extracts of specific drugs and volumes. It can be used in conditional demand letter processing, figure out which demand letters need to be processed sooner or have specific things that need to be addressed. Otherwise, there's some increase in risk exposure. It's being used to help claims processors very quickly understand if something is covered and why it's covered and which policy is relevant. We're using it to help basically clean up customer data that insurers have or audit, let's say, books of business. Let's say a reinsurer wants to reinsure a book of business. They can literally have the engine read 15, 50, 100,000 policies in just a matter of minutes, producing a data set, which they can then analyze more, more in a more regimented analytic fashion. And so, that is kind of driving us deeper and deeper into lots of the different areas of insurance where the opportunity for automation and margin expansion is real and is quite dramatic in many cases.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to take you a couple of steps back because you just provided so much information, and I'll start with something very, very, I don't know, rudimentary. It's like, oh, you have a platform to sell data, so usually we don't think about it, right? You'll go on a website, you'll think about, oh my God, I don't want Facebook to sell my data. Is that what we're talking about? Is that companies are going on, I don't know, an analyst in a company will go on your dashboard and go like, I need data about, or I have sets of data points that relate to what we're talking about, fires in LA, right? how does it work? Who has the data? How do they structure it? What are the requirements for them to upload that to your company, so someone else go like, yeah, I want to bid or I want to acquire that type of a data set?
So an important distinction to make is that we don't actually host any of the data. So the way to think about us is we're more like Google. We're a search engine. People are trying to find a data set that solves a specific problem. And so when we onboard, let's say, a risk vendor that has forest fire data, our job is to build a profile of them internally, which keeps track of all the data sets they have today, what those data sets can potentially be used for, and information about the company. That is not public. That is completely private. There's no list on Nomad Data of which vendors are selling what, because the marginal seller of data is maybe even an insurance company selling their claims data in an anonymous fashion, but they don't want that advertised to the world. And so those data sets will be cataloged on our end. The user comes in and says, we are looking for California forest fire data. Our AI is going to look across all the data we have on every single one of the 4,000 vendors that we have today. We add about 100 more every single month, but it's going to look through all the descriptions of the companies, all the descriptions of the products. But even more importantly, it's going to look through what we learn every single time that vendor responds to someone's request, like this one. Do you have California forest fire data? Because they will respond when they get that request and say, oh, yes, we have it on these 5 towns, counties, regions, states, countries, going back X years. We track X, Y, Z, and we can help you. And so that just trained us. We now know more about them. And so our job is to keep collecting data, about what it can do. Because what the data can do is not a static thing. Even a static data set, we're discovering new uses for it. And so we are cataloging those uses across the clients that search the platform. And so it's very, very effective as opposed to the yellow pages model where you have the one paragraph on each vendor. It changes once every couple of years, and it really doesn't have the information you need. We say, forget about that model. We're the search engine. You just type in, I need this, or the chat GPT, if you will, of data search, where you describe the specific use case, and those vendors respond to you. And so you get exactly what you need without having to contact dozens or hundreds of vendors.
I love I love that. It's such a beautiful indicator about how the same data set or even a changing data set, you have a change in how it's being consumed by whom, and later on you don't know for what reason it's being used, but you kind of guess. Do you know but the type of company that is looking and acquiring that data set.
Yeah, we know
It's
who's looking and
yeah,
why they're
yeah.
looking.
You
And
know
that's
the
very
why.
valuable because the
Yeah.
why is the way we learn. Because they ask the vendor, here's the why, can your data solve it? And they say, yes, we can solve XYZ problem. And so now we know, okay, next time somebody needs data on that, we now learn that. And every day we're learning more about these vendors. And we use that data in other ways to help make the users' lives easier.
This is such a powerful information. That metadata is amazing. It's in terms of indication of what will come next, and recognizing trends, validating trends. This is awesome.
And it's really helpful for us too, because the world tends to move in directions
Mm-hmm.
together. And so we'll get a first request for something we've never seen before. We'll have to maybe recruit new vendors. And then 2 days later, we get another request for the exact same thing, and another and another and another. Something is in the news. There's been some policy change, some change in, let's say, the technology landscape, and people need to know X all of a sudden. And so by being able to pool these together, we're able to do a better job servicing everyone.
Well, a couple of minutes earlier, you talked about Google or mentioned Google, and the same thing in our kind of prep call as being the biggest search engine, right? But
Yep.
in your case, it's more about search engine for private data sets. Now, when Google, I think they launched, they were looking at 200 categories, which was something super light. 200. Well, what is 200? It's nothing.
Yep.
How do you approach data categorization, and what type of technology are you using? Any vectors or things like that to understand better what is the data and quickly return an answer to the query?
We certainly do use vectors to help us understand which data sets and snippets of information we know about them are relevant to the user's query. But the most powerful means is still the last step, which is even though we may guess incorrectly using all these AI and vector-driven approaches. The last step is to ask the vendor and say, hey, here is exactly what the client is looking for. Do you do this? So even if we're wrong and we send
Mhm.
it to 4 people that it's not relevant to, they're just going to say no. The buyer doesn't even know we sent it to that person. They just see the responses to the people that say yes. So it gives us, more tolerance to be wrong, and we need to be wrong. We want to be wrong because we also want to learn. So we're taking guesses to try to learn more about these vendors, and so it's a crowdsourcing engine at the end of the day for them to give us more information about their data. And so that is a key part of this because every other solution we've seen is static. Someone compiles the best list of data vendors on earth. 6 months later, that's not a really useful list anymore. A year later, it's barely worth visiting. And so we needed a mechanism where this data could somehow be up to date. And that's why that we built a lot of what we've built is to continue to learn about these data vendors so that we continue to match them.
Now, I reach out to I invited you to the podcast because you were on my ITC people that I need to meet. However, didn't have the time because, needless to say, ITC there are 10,000 people. We don't have the time and the ability to, I don't know, to manage all the schedule and having the ability to meet everyone and every time. And I think that it takes sometimes even a year or more until I will meet everyone that I wanted, and then there are always serendipity, and then there is another ITC in the middle, and many other great conferences. Looking forward to the one ITI in New York that will be in June, and then there is the Reuters in Chicago, and many others. So, what was that your first ITC?
We went in 2023, 2024, and then we just did ITC London last week.
How was London? That was the first.
It was. It was definitely a different vibe. It was a lot quieter than
Of course.
the Las Vegas versions. I think there were about 500 attendees, but proportionally, I mean, we still got a bunch of meetings. We got good traffic. Nothing like the Vegas one, just given the scale. I mean, we would have 100
Yeah.
people come by in Vegas. We probably had a couple dozen come by, which was still a very fruitful conference, and I'm sure will only grow. There's no lack of insurance companies in Europe, so this got us a lot closer to that ecosystem.
Well, InsurTech Insights London, that should be in March. That's the bigger one in London. And then, of course, they have, lucky, well, for them being London as the capital of insurance or the origin of modern insurance, you have so many activities, small one, a very specialized one. And then, of course, we'll give a shout out to InsurTech London that they're running their, I think, almost weekly or bi-weekly meetings with a bunch of people in the city. It's very remarkable to see when you have the density of professionals. It's so much easier to bring things together. If there is one of my regrets of moving from New York to LA is that it's the density, the traffic of how many people passing, so that everyone is just a block away. While
Yeah.
here in LA, whenever I'm trying to organize an InsurTech 11, we always need to consider that. Yeah, that's they're in downtown, so it will take them 2 hours to show up. So yeah, it may or may not happen. No. So back to ITC Vegas. Who did you speak with? You don't need to mention names, but what was the profile of people? Any big insights in terms of go like, that's great. That was worthwhile.
I mean, our target initially was data teams, so chief data officers, SVP technology, head of data, data sourcing, data enrichment, and then I'd say over the last year it expanded to chief underwriting officers, chief risk officers, claims technology, as our use cases have expanded. And a lot of these meetings, we're discovering new use cases for the technology as well. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Data is a very amorphous thing. Like I can look at a data set and not even imagine all the things it can be used for. And so a lot of the problem is sort of marrying the data to the use case, which is what our
Hmm.
business does. But we're seeing a very similar type of conversation around artificial intelligence. It's a very
Yeah.
powerful technology. It's very amorphous, and you can apply it in a lot of different ways. So the work we do with companies around AI looks a lot like what we do on data, where we go into the company, we understand what their problem is, what their problems are, which ones have the highest ROI to solve. And some of those solutions are about bringing data to bear, and other solutions are about bringing our document workflow engine to automate some process. But you really have to get in there and understand the specifics of the business for both applying the data as well as for applying artificial intelligence. So some people think they're very different businesses, but I actually think they're more similar than most.
Well, they are the same. In a sense, they are the same business, in my opinion. And I agree with you on that, because at the end of the day, what are we looking at? AI doesn't really function without the data. Even before, in terms of training the machine, at the end of the day, the machine needs to act upon a certain data, and that's the closed map of that entire world. Unless you can give it some sort of other features that it can go and browse and learn something new, or manage to generate something else. But that will require it to know how to generate new data outside of the data that it already has. And it needs to be dramatically different than the data. Most of them are very, very sophisticated at best. Data search engines. That's most of kind of AIs that we found, but they are digested in a way that it's easier for us to consume. And well, for most of us, it's just, hey, let me write something, and it will go through, as you mentioned earlier, a terabyte of data, and in a few seconds or a minute, it will spit out an information and go like, oh, this is what it actually means, which is brilliant. Now, were you located in one of the towns? Sorry, did you at the booth or just walked around?
We had a booth both years. We got a bigger booth the second year because we had a great first year, and hopefully we'll have a bigger booth next year.
Ah, congratulations! That's a very nice uh, indicator of growth and success.
Yeah, I'd say it's been our most successful conference to date.
Where and which area were you? Because last year, well, basically last October, it was based on towns, and then you had like streets that specialize in something.
So we were in the startup innovation section the first year, which was all these small kiosks, early stage startups. The second
Were you?
year,
Huh.
yeah, and then the second year we were just below the meeting zone, like one row south. We were near, I think Duck Creek was at the end of our row. I'm not sure what the focus of that row was.
Well, it's I had a conversation with Drake and Bill about understanding the new structure of how they do that, because most of the time people go like, yeah, I don't want to be next to my competitor, but then, okay, show how you're different than your competitor, or think about not about being next to your competitor, but think about the buyers, because they now know that this is where they need to go to check data, and not just go around aimlessly, and they may or may not never meet you. Maybe they want to go to, as you mentioned, Duck Creek at the end of the street. Duck Creek is a very big core system. It's a very well-known brand. Maybe they're going there, and on the way they go like, wonder, what is Nomad? That's a cool name. Let me check that out. And I don't remember your booth, but whatever marketing and branding uh, action you took there, that could have been an extra. It's like, oh, let's have a conversation. By the way, for everyone is hearing, it's always about the espresso. This is how you get me. Espresso and something sweet. Anyway, we are just in Vegas in those conferences. We need coffee, quality coffee, and we need sugar to run us. That's basically it. That's
I
kind
would
of
say
like,
London did an excellent job with the espresso. They had an
yes.
espresso bar with at most a 1 minute wait. I must have had 6 cortados my first day.
Oh, and the milk beer is actually digestible. The European conferences are remarkable in terms of the quality of food design, and it's a different vibe. The folks at DIA, they are doing a great job in terms of that, in terms of the internal design, everything. It gives you a different vibe about everything, and I think that InsurTech Insights, I don't remember if that was the New York one or the London one. As you go up the escalators, there was a guy that was already brewing espresso as you go up. He had like one of those mobile that can actually provide 7 or even 9 bars pressure.
Wow.
And as you go, it brews you go up the escalators, and there you go. Here's your shot of espresso. But, everyone and his, my vice is drinking a lot of espresso. Yeah, that's I would say the list of a problem in terms of different vices that people have.
Yeah, that was
But,
essential, especially with the jet lag for us.
oh, yes, that's we can talk about jet lag on a different podcast. But do you have any technique for jet lag?
I mean, I've got regimented like times that I need to sleep. Do I take a nap or not? It all depends on, time the flight leaves, what time I land, what geography, how big the time change is. I've got it down pretty good. I mean, I'd say the only one I've never figured out is New York to Asia. The 12 hours, it's a world of pain for a week on each end.
Yeah, it's I would yeah. And don't forget what happens during the flight itself. I find that critical. If you manage to sleep, don't manage how well. Um, and
Sleeping on
when
the
do you land?
plane to Europe is essential. Either you sleep on the plane or you take the first flight out from New York, and then you don't have to worry about that problem.
But for you, it's a easy hop. It's like what, 6 hours? It's easy.
Yeah, it's not the flight time that's the issue. It's like the time change combined, and when you're supposed to sleep is the challenge.
Yeah, and then you're lucky if it's you land during noon, morning, head out for a run, or just start
Yeah,
consuming, or as we
straight
call
to a
it.
meeting, nap, no nap.
This is why the most important thing about business travel is the arrival lounge. And God bless Heathrow, which I don't like. I have a lot of things against and for Heathrow. The arrivals lounge, shower, coffee, a quick bite, and change of clothes, and you're ready to grab the Elizabeth and head to the city. But let's go talk about data, because at this point I'm sure that everyone dropped off the conversation. Gilad is talking about coffee and travel again. And I was just in Georgia, Tbilisi, the country, and I
Yeah,
can
I've been to
tell you,
Tbilisi, fun town.
Tbilisi, I think that just from, well, I'll say Khachapuri because I don't know how to pronounce any other
Yeah, that's
dishes
the
that they
only
have.
one you really need to pronounce. Hachapuri.
Chinkeli, I hope I pronounced that
Khinkali.
correctly.
I don't
Chinkali.
know.
But they have so
100%.
many. I actually bought a series. I bought like a small pamphlet of the different dishes that they have and different chachapuris that they have. And I was like, yeah, one is cheese, but in completely different cheese. And it's like, oh,
I
the
went on
mountain.
a I went on a Hachapuri tour when I was in Tbilisi, which I
Oh,
highly recommend. It's all like right out of the oven, 4 or 5 different
always.
kinds. You just walk and eat cheese for 3 hours.
Yes. Oh, yeah. There was a place that I found that they actually do the boat style. I don't remember. It has the
With the
special.
egg.
Yeah, the one with the egg. And they do that with truffles.
Huh. You went to
Yeah.
fancier places than I did.
Oh no, no, no. It wasn't that fancy, but yes, I went to a few fancy places as well. But a lot of The best ones are the small bakeries. That's like what, $4 at best. The most expensive one will be $4.50, which is what, $1.50 at best, maybe. Okay, doesn't matter. Data. Let's talk more about data. So you talked about the ITC, the different profiles, and what people curious about when people reach out in different road shows and you present what you guys doing. What do they care about?
I mean, the thing they want to accomplish more than anything is finding the data they're looking for. But I'd say everyone's always skeptical. Well, how can you possibly have all this data, or what do you have? You know, it's a hard thing to prove that we have a lot of data. Like, and honestly, the number of vendors we have, that isn't the point. Whether it's 50 vendors or 50,000, the only thing that matters is we find the data that the customer is looking for. So, you know, it's always challenging for the customer to figure out without using the platform. And that's what we recommend, is that they do a trial and actually see it in action. But it's hard to prove. I mean, we got a request even today. We want to know the number of vendors and the number per category and the number per geography. But
Oh,
none of that means anything in practice. Again, if we either have that one vendor they need or we don't, and we go out there in response to the requests. Let's say we don't have a vendor someone needs. We've built some pretty amazing technology using AI to scan 100 million companies. We'll sometimes email 1,000 companies and recruit them just because the customer is looking for them. So it's not just about the catalog or the number or the categories. It's the whole process. And so the only way to really measure the process is to use the product.
who should reach out to you? Who?
Yeah, there's two real audiences. You know, anybody in the data organization that cares about helping their companies source new data, helping teams that use data coordinate through our procurement platform. You know, anybody in that procurement or data strategy food chain. And then the other is folks that feel that their division would benefit from AI. So it's folks in underwriting, it's folks in claims that, you know, obviously have read the news that this technology can be transformative, but actually want to do something real. You know, we don't really focus on selling technology. We focus on selling a solution that solves a particular problem. And so we sit down with the client, understand, you know, what are they spending time with on claims? What are the painful processes on onboarding new clients? And then we basically deliver an automated solution using the technology to solve a real world problem. So, you know, anybody that sees problems like that, litigation documents, procurement contracts. We even have a tool that will redline contracts or paperwork as you using your past learning. So anybody that feels automation would help them.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to be a little bit more egoistic about that and going to use this opportunity to use you for the book that I've been working on way too many years. We'll talk about it in the future. And basically ask you, and feel free, yes, no, if there is a... Do you have a great... It doesn't have to be great. It can be just shameful as well. A failure story that turned into a success. Something that went wrong. You learn how to pick up the pieces. And now there is something better and stronger.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, even with this data search platform, I mean, when we started out and, you know, had a huge failure. We were seeing massive churn and we couldn't grow the business. We had really gone a little bit too broad because what we saw is that everybody, almost everybody in any role needs data for something. Not many people have a recurring need for data. And so we went just way too broad in the beginning. We were targeting anyone and everyone. They used the product. They said, thank you. We found exactly what we were looking for and we're good and we're canceling. And, you know, we were just churning, you know, 100% churn over the course of, you know, 18 months. We just couldn't grow the business. And we realized we had to make some pretty big changes if we were gonna make this a viable business. And, you know, we did two main things. One was to sort of revamp the product to make it stickier, create the need for you to need to come back in and do things and add value beyond just the initial connection, which is really where the procurement platform was born. Then the other was a different set of targeting. Rather than targeting anyone that needs data, we started to target teams that are tasked with finding data on a recurring basis. So data sourcing teams, data acquisition, data strategy, you know, at a consulting firm, at an insurance company, at an investment firm, where their job is day in and day out to do this. And so they have the need tomorrow, next month, next quarter. And so that really transformed the business, basically removed the churn problem and got people coming into the platform in a consistent basis and allowed us to really grow the business last year.
Awesome. Thank you for indulging me. How can people reach out to you and what should they ask for?
Yeah, you can come directly to our site. We've got a little chat bot that will take you to a person, not to an AI. So that's one way to reach out, and then we can set up a demo. But yeah, if you're interested in how data can augment and improve your business as well as how automation can, please reach out.
Brad, thank you very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure
Of course.
learning about what you're doing, what Nomad Data is doing, and I hope that people will reach out and work more about, the great things that you're doing.
Thanks. Appreciate the time.